Imagine flying across the country to a podcast, spending your own money, only to have a guest drop the N-word at you, and the hosts just sit there doing nothing. What happened next will shock you. If you've ever stumbled across the Hodgetwins online, you already know that Kevin and Keith Hodge are inseparable as brothers and collaborators, but also polarizing figures in the digital media world. For over half a decade, they've steadily built a distinct persona on social media platforms and YouTube, carving out a niche that is as controversial as it is attention-grabbing. Their content leans heavily into a right-wing, anti-Israel viewpoint, and they've managed to cultivate a loyal following of viewers who echo or amplify their perspectives. Whether you agree with them or not, their influence in certain circles of online commentary is undeniable, and their videos generate a steady stream of engagement, clicks, and, of course, revenue. What makes the Hodgetwins particularly interesting is the dual nature of their content. On one side, you have their standard online videos. These are short, punchy, and often designed to provoke strong reactions from viewers. The videos tend to be filled with pointed commentary, direct critiques, and occasionally inflammatory statements aimed at public figures or broader socio-political topics. On the other side, they host a podcast out of Las Vegas, a space that ostensibly allows for longer discussions, interviews, and the introduction of guest voices. While this might seem like an opportunity for balanced dialogue, the reality is that the podcast has a very specific ecosystem. It's curated, controlled, and shaped by the twins' perspectives and agenda. Appearing as a guest on their podcast is far from a casual affair. Unlike most mainstream media interviews where travel and accommodations might be covered, or where the very act of being invited is seen as an honor, the Hodgetwins operate differently. Their podcast comes with a financial caveat. Anyone who wants to participate must pay their own way. That includes covering travel expenses, accommodation, meals, and any incidental costs associated with showing up. In other words, if you want to be a part of their platform, the burden of participation falls entirely on you. It's not presented as a generous opportunity, but rather as a transactional experience, where guests are essentially paying to be part of their curated narrative. This context is critical when we consider what happened with the amazing Lucas, a well-known YouTuber recognized for his sharp wit, analytical mind, and articulate debate style. Lucas isn't your average content creator. He has spent years building a reputation as someone who can navigate complex discussions, dissect flawed arguments, and respond with clarity under pressure. When Lucas was invited, or more accurately, when he agreed to join the Hodgetwins podcast, it came with the understanding that he would cover all associated costs. Flying to Las Vegas, arranging accommodations, and making the logistical effort were all on him. In many ways, this set the stage for a high-stakes encounter, because Lucas wasn't just another casual guest. He was a participant bringing his own intellectual rigor into a space dominated by the twins' familiar routines. Upon arrival, Lucas observed the setup of the podcast and immediately noticed the dynamics in the room. Alongside the Hodgetwins, there were a few other attendees, including some Black individuals who were present, presumably, either as audience members or contributors in some informal capacity. Then there was a Palestinian man, whose role seemed to hover somewhere between production and casual participation. While his exact responsibilities weren't clear, his presence added another layer of complexity to the interaction. For someone like Lucas, who thrives on clarity and structured debate, this eclectic mix of participants immediately signaled that the conversation would not just be about ideas, it would also be about navigating personalities, cultural dynamics, and unexpected provocations. Lucas's intellect and composure became immediately apparent. From previous debates and content, he had proven himself to be quick-witted and capable of thinking on his feet. Against most opponents, this would be enough to dominate a conversation, but the Hodgetwins presented a unique challenge. Despite their social media popularity, Kevin and Keith are not known for deep analytical thought or strong critical reasoning. They have a tendency to repeat familiar talking points and rely on their audience's existing biases rather than creating or defending arguments with nuance. This created a striking contrast. Lucas's methodical, evidence-based reasoning versus the twins' repetitive, performative approach. For anyone watching, or for those present in the room, the disparity was obvious. Lucas was not only participating in a discussion, He was navigating a minefield of intellectual gaps, forced to clarify statistics, contextualize ideas, and maintain decorum while others floundered around him.
They hit me up. I'm like, yo, what are we talking about? He's like, okay, we're going to be talking about this. Let's get a date. I'm like, bet, right? I'm in LA, they in Vegas. So I spend time, I spend money to come to this podcast. There's me, the Hodgetwins, this other black guy, another black guy, and then this Arab, right? The Palestinian. And we're going back and forth. And eventually it's looking bad.
The conversation quickly escalated into areas of real tension. The Palestinian man, who had initially seemed like a peripheral figure, began interjecting in ways that were both provocative and offensive. At one point, a racial slur was used, prompting Lucas to confront it directly. His reaction was not simply about personal offense. It was an assertion of boundaries and an insistence on accountability in discourse. He highlighted the inappropriateness of the language and tried to redirect the conversation toward constructive debate. Meanwhile, the Hodgetwins largely remained passive, allowing this behavior to continue, which only intensified the pressure on Lucas. It became clear that the twins' interest in hosting a guest wasn't about facilitating dialogue. It was about creating content that could be monetized, regardless of the chaos or disrespect occurring in the room. What makes this scenario so instructive is how it illuminates the twins' operational philosophy. Despite their rhetoric about empowerment, business success, and leadership, they fail to accommodate or even respect the very guests who invest their own resources to appear on the show. Lucas had flown across state lines, paid for accommodations, and arrived prepared to engage seriously, yet he faced both offensive behavior and the twins' lack of intervention. This exposes a contradiction. They preach empowerment while simultaneously neglecting the fundamental responsibilities of hosting and moderating. Moreover, the encounter highlighted broader issues of intellectual rigor or the lack thereof. Within their platform, Lucas repeatedly pointed out factual errors, gaps in reasoning, and misunderstandings in basic statistics, such as per capita metrics. The twins' inability to respond coherently underscored a structural weakness in their content strategy. Their success depends less on substantive analysis and more on provocation and echo chambers. They thrive when the conversation stays predictable, when guests either mirror their views or fail to challenge them in meaningful ways. Introduce someone like Lucas, who is both articulate and independent, and the entire dynamic begins to unravel. This situation was further compounded by performative theatrics, such as Kevin openly stating, "I don't care about black people," and then attempting to backtrack with the claim that he didn't care about any race. Moments like these, though almost absurd in their candor, are revealing. They demonstrate a lack of awareness, a reliance on spectacle over substance, and a tendency to prioritize monetization and shock value over genuine engagement. For Lucas, these statements were another layer of challenge to navigate, not just intellectually, but ethically and socially. In the end, what this episode illustrates is multifaceted. It's a cautionary tale about transactional participation in digital media, highlighting the pitfalls of engaging with personalities who prioritize provocation over dialogue. It exposes the tensions between intellectual rigor and performative content, showing how easily a discussion can be derailed when hosts are unwilling or unable to moderate responsibly. It also underscores the value of preparation, composure, and integrity in debate. Lucas came equipped with both, and his performance highlighted the disparities between thoughtful engagement and performative hosting. By the time the podcast concluded, or at least reached a temporary semblance of resolution, the implications were clear. Guests who invest in these platforms should be aware of both the opportunities and the risks. They might gain exposure, but they also risk encountering hostility, mismanagement, and intellectual opposition that is ill-prepared to handle dissenting perspectives. The Hodgetwins podcast, while popular and profitable, is structured to reward controversy over clarity, spectacle over substance, and provocation over genuine dialogue. For anyone studying the intersection of digital media, content creation, and political commentary, the Lucas episode is a case study in how online personalities manage discourse, power dynamics, and guest interactions. It is a lesson in the importance of preparation, the necessity of ethical moderation, and the consequences of prioritizing monetization over intellectual engagement. Lucas emerged not just as a participant, but as a model of how to navigate complex, high-pressure conversations with skill, intelligence, and composure, qualities that, in contrast, highlighted the shortcomings of the hosts themselves. Ultimately, the Hodgetwins platform is a fascinating blend of charisma, controversy, and commerce, but it is not a space designed for substantive debate. For those willing to step into it, like Lucas, there is the potential to shine, to reveal gaps in reasoning, and to challenge both the hosts and the audience to think more critically. Yet, as this episode demonstrates, it also requires navigating a landscape where financial investment, personal preparation, and ethical fortitude are tested in equal measure.
The first time, he was like, oh, we're all N-words, right, to the Jews. And I heard that. I'm like, what the F did you say, right? I get it. I'm not allowing someone to just say the hard R, right, in my presence. Now, no one else responded to it. The two black men that were sitting down didn't respond to it. The twins didn't respond to it. I'm the only one. So I'm in a room full of soldiers, bruh. And they have this Palestinian. He talks about how he fled Palestine because of what was going on and now he's with his family. Right. He said to the Jews, we're all inward. I'm like, you don't say that, right? I don't want to hear that word.
The amazing Lucas is a top-tier YouTuber, truly someone who stands out in his field. When I say excellent, I mean he's sharp, witty, and capable of holding his own in debates where most would falter. He was invited for an interview, and when he arrived, he noticed the setup. The Hodgetwins themselves, a few black attendees, and a Palestinian man whose roles seemed to hover somewhere between sound and production. Lucas, being as clever as he is, quickly assessed the dynamic. The Hodgetwins aren't exactly known for intellectual agility. They struggle to articulate ideas clearly and often fail to think them through. Against someone like Lucas, who can debate with precision and insight, they were outmatched. It wasn't long before Lucas started gaining the upper hand, pointing out factual errors and misunderstandings, including missteps on per capita statistics and other specifics. As the conversation progressed and Lucas's points kept landing, the Palestinian participant began to step in. The Hodgetwins were essentially on the ropes, unable to mount a coherent defense, and Lucas's dominance in the discussion was unmistakable. And then, the moment that would define the encounter happened.
I was just awestruck by the level of stupidity that was on display. And it came to racism, right? Because I brought up the study where it talks about, hey, there's a father in the household, that, there's a mother in the household, they live in an affluent neighborhood, right? They're, good income, that one of the factors that will determine if the child will go to prison, okay, is the racial bias of the people around them, the racial bias of the white people around them. They lose it. Oh, I don't believe you. I don't believe that. I'm like, you can look it up. What are you talking about? Then this fool starts interjecting whatever. I was like, why don't you shut the F up? Like, that's what you need to do. Shut the F up. So he says something like blah, 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 blah.
Things took a sharp turn when the N-word was thrown into the conversation. The amazing Lucas immediately called it out, saying, hold on, no one should be using that word. The Palestinian man tried to cover himself, claiming, oh no, I just meant that Jews see all of us that way, not me personally. But Lucas wasn't buying it. He firmly stated that the word was unacceptable, emphasizing, you're Palestinian. That word does not belong in your mouth. The tension escalated quickly. At one point, Lucas had to warn him seriously, hinting that continued use could lead to a physical confrontation. The Hodgetwins, meanwhile, dismissed the warning, claiming no fight would happen and suggesting Lucas couldn't do anything. The moment grew tense. Lucas was dominating the debate intellectually, but he had no interest in turning it physical, yet he faced someone blatantly disrespectful, hurling offensive language at black people. What shocked him most was the Hodgetwins' passivity. They just sat back and let it happen. Even amid this chaos, Lucas kept his focus sharp, highlighting the twins' low intellectual rigor. He pointed out their inability to reason through statistics like per capita figures, their struggles to articulate ideas, and their general lack of coherent responses. His critique was clear, incisive, and impossible to ignore. That part of the podcast was a real eye-opener. Things escalated when the N-word came into play. The amazing Lucas immediately called it out. This was unacceptable. At first, the Palestinian man tried to excuse himself, saying he meant it in a broader sense, that Jews see all of them that way, but Lucas wasn't having it. He made it clear that word simply does not belong in his mouth. The tension escalated to near physical levels. Lucas warned him seriously. Keep using that language, and it could get physical. The Hodgetwins, however, downplayed it, insisting nothing would happen, implying Lucas was powerless. Meanwhile, Lucas kept his focus, dominating the debate intellectually. Yet here he was, facing someone openly disrespectful, hurling racial slurs, and the twins were doing nothing to intervene. As the discussion continued, Lucas dissected their intellectual shortcomings, their inability to reason through statistics, articulate ideas, or respond coherently in real time. The Hodgetwins clearly struggled against someone as sharp as Lucas, and their limitations were painfully obvious. Things spiraled further when the Palestinian participant began interrupting again. Lucas challenged him, questioning his absurd logic and outright offensive comments. At one point, the confrontation boiled over. The Palestinian man directly insulted Lucas with a racial slur. The Hodgetwins immediately positioned themselves between Lucas and the man, seemingly protecting him, while brushing off the behavior with a casual, "Relax, it's just a word." The absurdity was staggering. Here was a black guest who had flown from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, paying his own way to participate, showing up ready to engage in dialogue. Yet the hosts, the Hodgetwins, who often speak about Black empowerment and business success, offered no support or accommodation. Instead, they allowed a clearly disrespectful outsider to dominate and derail the conversation. Lucas was left confronting this man alone, defending himself not only from blatant racism but also from the passive complicity of the hosts. He had come prepared, articulating points, countering flawed arguments, and demonstrating intellectual rigor, yet the people running the show, who had the means to ensure a professional, respectful environment, chose not to. They monetized the situation, profiting off the video, all while letting someone with nothing constructive to contribute hurl insults. In essence, the episode exposed the Hodgetwins' limitations. They cannot handle opposing viewpoints with intelligence or decorum. They fail to protect their guests, and they allow chaos and disrespect to undermine any meaningful conversation. Lucas was the only one carrying the discussion with clarity and principle, despite paying his own way to face both verbal attacks and the host's negligence. Eventually, the podcast seemed to get back on track, but tensions weren't fully gone. During a heated exchange, one of the Hodgetwins challenged Lucas, asking, "Why don't you care? You should care. He's talking ill about Black people." That's when Kevin spoke up, bluntly saying, "I don't care about Black people." It was shocking and almost surreal to hear it on camera. Realizing the impact of his words, Kevin quickly tried to backtrack. Wait, let me clarify. I don't care about any race." Classic damage control, but the damage was already done. Moments like this reveal the unfiltered nature of their perspectives and their tendency to stumble under scrutiny. Looking at the bigger picture, it's clear why the Hodgetwins operate the way they do. The online right-wing space can be lucrative, especially for figures willing to trade subtlety for controversy. The twins themselves are not innovators. They rely on recycled reactions, basic podcasts, and deliberately provocative content that offends Jews, Black people, or anyone else who stumbles into their orbit. There's little intellectual framework or thoughtfulness behind it. It's all surface-level spectacle. Given all this, it's no surprise they're hesitant to release the full video. That's why Lucas posted about it on the 20th under the headline, "Hodgetwins' interview nearly ended in a brawl." There you had a situation where a Palestinian man was freely hurling racial slurs. The twins thought it was amusing, and the discussion almost boiled over into violence. How much of this will actually make it to the final cut? Only time will tell. So, what do you think? Back at it again with another episode of the Celebrity Podcast Breakdown. We're out.